Okay. So before we get into any modeling, and this class, it'll seem like it's really slow, okay? But it's just because I want you to get the real fundamentals right, the basics correct, because with this software, when you're modeling and you're doing something for production, okay, or a prototype that you're going to be producing to test your product, or it's a fit or something needs to fit with another existing part, if your basic dimensions are wrong, okay, or the method behind your modeling is wrong, it'll throw everything out. All right, so it's really important to get the basics right at the start. So that's why we spend a lot of time on some of the easiest stuff to begin with. So first up, your basic menu at the top. This little pin icon, if you pin that down, that'll pin down that menu. Just makes it a bit easier to select things. On the right of the screen, you can see these sort of shortcut tabs here. Design library and appearances we'll touch on later in the semester, but for now, don't have to worry about them too much. So just click new and just open up this pop-up here. File new. So I just want to talk a little bit about the different file types. So there's 3 different file types in Solidworks: parts, assemblies, and drawings. It gives you a bit of a description there. The basic idea is if you're building a car, okay, you don't put all the parts together in one hit. You put the engine together, you put the dashboard together, all right, then you assemble them with the body of the car, all right, so you build it up bit by bit. It's a little bit how this as parts and assemblies work, all right, so you build up your parts, your individual parts, and then you might put them together in an assembly file, and then you can put one assembly file in another assembly file, all right, so you can sort of build it up like that. The first project we're going to do, we're going to build 7 individual parts, and then we're going to put them together in an assembly. All right, we're going to put 3 parts in one sub-assembly, then put that in another assembly and add the rest of the parts to it. The drawings is where you can do the 2D stuff. So you do the 2D technical drawings, which can be based on assemblies or parts. All right, and that's where you can then communicate by printing out, printing a PDF file, sending that, emailing that, or printing on the printer or the plotter in 2D. Solidworks has a lot of tutorials built in. All right, you can access that through this button here. It'll show up this link on the side. The other way to get there is to go up the top to help, Solidworks tutorials, and that'll open up this information here. All right, so if after today you feel like you haven't really taken anything in, just go to these tutorials here and just go through lesson 1 parts. All right, that's the main sort of thing we'll be doing today, and the introduction to SolidWorks. But as you get more confident and you're like, okay, I've got an hour, I want to spend some time learning something, I don't really know what I should do, come here and have a look at the tutorials, and you can go to all SolidWorks tutorials and you can say, okay, I'm interested in learning about assembly mates, or equations, or fillets, or sheet metal. Now, a lot of this stuff we will learn later in the semester, but if you get an understanding of it now, it'll just help you get a better understanding of the software as a whole. So that's one of the things where, in your own time, you can have a look at that sort of stuff. I won't really do much of those in class. So we're going to start with a part file. So click on part and click OK. And what you can see in the empty space in front of you, the main area is called your viewport. Those that have used Rhino and different sort of software like that, you may have had a screen that looked like this with, front, top, side views. All right. If you like working that way, you can set SolidWorks up to run that way. But I would strongly recommend you stay with the existing single viewport. All right, and I'll show you how to navigate around that in a second. So there's a lot of terms today that I'll go through. This big menu at the top, this is called the command manager. If you double click it, or click and drag, actually it's currently locked, I don't know about yours, see what happens. Nothing happening. Okay. It's good. SolidWorks there's some settings in SolidWorks that actually prevent that from undocking. So everything on this screen here is customizable. So if you do drag that command manager off, it's the same. You can drag it back to the top by going back to the arrows or to the sides of the screen. Okay, so you'll see an arrow in the middle of that area, and then the blue bar will go up across the top of the screen. Oh, sorry, I can't show. Some other people have been able to do it. Yeah, I don't want to like that. All right, that's how you grab it. So these are the tabs here. So features, sketch, evaluate, etc. All right. So there's a setting where you can have this dock and undock by double clicking, which is turned off. But if you click on one of these tabs and you can drag that off, and you can reposition it. All right. So if you prefer to work in a certain way, you can set up your interface in that way. Now your interface will stay the way it is when you're working on your own computer. So at home on a laptop, log, turn off, turn on, open up SolidWorks again, it'll be the same. When we're here on a server, it won't always carry over, okay? Some things do, some settings do, but there are some things that get reset. I'm not 100% sure on, or I can't remember exactly which ones do and don't, but just be aware of that. If you are on your laptop though, or a computer at work, you're working every day, it'll just stay that way. You can also save the interface, save all the shortcuts that you've created, export them and load them into another SolidWorks software on another computer, okay, if you were to move between different workstations. So that's Command Manager. Now there are tabs here, we can turn them off, turn them on and off. So you can right click on the tab and you can see the ones with the tick, they're currently on. The only ones we really need are features and sketch. The rest of them you can turn off. Most of those are, evaluate, simulation, analysis. A lot more advanced, a lot more engineering based. We're not going to touch those this semester. There are some others like surfacing and sheet metal we'll look at later on. All right, not today though, sometime in the next couple of weeks. On the left of screen, this is your feature tree or property manager. This area will change depending on what you're currently doing. All right, but by default, it'll show you your feature tree. So there's a couple of smaller tabs in this one. So the very first one is the feature manager design tree. We've got property manager, configurations, dimension expert, and display manager. Again, we don't touch many of those. We will look at configurations in maybe sort of week 3, 4, something like that. And display is to do with rendering and any appearances. We'll look at that towards the end of semester. Most of the work will be left in the design tree though. So in this design tree at the moment you can see front, top and right plane and the origin. So what those are showing, they're our starting points. Now everything in this feature tree here will stay here. It's a bit like your history. So as you add sketches, as you add features, that tree will build down. All right, then you're able to go back and edit them. You can either reorder them or delete and change things. You can also hide and show things. So if you just left click on the front plane, you see that little shortcut bar come up, all right, where you've got some icons. There's sketch, show, zoom, and normal 2. Or if you right click, you'll get a full menu, which is some other options. All right. What I'd like you to do is just click on each of those planes and just press show. And then on your screen, you should be able to see the planes in the middle area of the viewport. So let's work out how to navigate this. So with your mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out, okay, by scrolling that wheel. Now if you zoom out so far that you sort of lose where you are on the page, if you hit the F key on the keyboard, that will take you back to full screen. Okay, sort of zoom to selection or zoom to extents. Your arrow keys, okay? Your arrow keys on your keyboard, when you press those, each rotation is 15 degrees. So you can go around 15 degrees, up, down, or side to side. If you hold the shift key with an arrow and press an arrow key, you'll go 90 degrees. All right, so that can be really quick if you want to go from front view to side view. Now, as well as zoom in and out, when you hold down the mouse wheel, which is like the middle mouse button, you can rotate your view. All right. So you can rotate around to get the sort of angle that you want to work on. And then the last one to be aware of for how you can sort of move around is, and I think the one that you need to be aware of the most as you're sketching, that is to get normal to, which means when you're sketching on one of these planes or on a face, you don't want to be sketching with that plane on an angle, all right? You want to be looking directly at that plane. So to do that, what you can do is select a plane. So you can see here the difference here. I've selected the front plane. And if you have that little shortcut menu come up, you can see this icon here, normal to, which is a plane with an arrow going up. If you click that, it'll take you to a view directly above that plane. Now, another way of doing that is to hit the space bar on the keyboard, and that's going to open up this view orientation window pop-up. The three-dimensional object here, which lets you select on different angles. That's new in SolidWorks, I think in 2015. I've never liked it, so I'd always turn it off. But if you like it, you can leave it on, and you can select different views and angles using that. If you turn it off, when you hit the space bar, it'll just come up like this, right? And again, by hitting the space bar, you can go here to front, top, right, rear planes. Or if you have a plane or face selected, again, when you hit space bar, you can go normal to, and that will take you onto that plane. The last things to mention with this viewport, in the bottom left of the viewport, you have your three axes, X, Y, and Z. That's just showing you your current sort of orientation, all right, which way's up, which way's down. If you sort of get lost and you don't know which way you're facing, just go space bar and go isometric view, or go front view, and that'll just take you back to the starting point. The origin, which you can see here in the feature tree, if you select that, the origin is a point that is at the middle of those three planes. So that is essentially your 0, 0, 0 location. Now, that's important. The origin is really important because that helps us have a reference point for whatever geometry we're building. All right, so whenever we build a feature of a part, we always start with geometry, and what I always want you to think about is how am I referencing that to the origin? If you don't reference the origin, then your part can never be fully defined. And you'll hear me talk about underdefined and fully defined a lot in these earlier weeks. That's to do with how you can control and set up your sketches so that they're really easy to edit, really easy to troubleshoot when you've got problems, all right? And that's also one of the main assessable criteria of the first project, is that you've fully defined all your sketches, all right? Okay, so that's some of the basics. So let's now have a go at some sketching. So pick any of the planes, all right? Just select any of the planes, and then at the top of the screen, click on the Sketch tab, and then click the Sketch icon in the top left. All right. Now that should take your screen normal to whatever plane you had selected, and now you're in Edit Sketch mode. Okay. So Edit Sketch mode, you can tell you're in because that top left icon now says Exit Sketch, and in the top right of this viewport, you have an Accept Sketch icon and a cross. The red cross will cancel anything that you've done in that sketch. So if it's a new sketch, you've made all these things, you press the red cross, it'll cancel it all right? Or if you edit a sketch you've already started, all right? So let's say you create a sketch, you accept it, you open it up again to edit, you make some changes, you're not happy with it, press the red cross, it'll just reset it back to the last point, all right? All right, so, and you can also see in the feature tree on the left, it says sketch 1, all right? So that's showing you what sketch you're currently in and editing. I want to teach you really good habits from the start though, all right? So whilst all the options are up here on the menu, you can click and move the mouse and back and forth. A lot of the shortcuts are either on the keyboard or using what's called mouse gestures, okay, for how you can sketch. So we'll go through those mouse gestures first. So how to use a mouse gesture is you right click, okay, hold that right mouse button down and then just drag your cursor. So if you drag it to the left and you drag it over that icon, you'll have the line tool, all right? So when your cursor looks like the pencil with a straight line and you click down and you click again, that'll enable you to draw a straight line, all right? So just draw some shapes using that straight line. And what you'll find is you'll have these yellow sort of indicators on screen, okay? They will indicate to you when you're drawing either a horizontal line or a vertical line. Or if you have some lines at an angle and then you draw another line at a similar angle, you can make a line parallel, right? So just draw a few shapes around. Doesn't really matter what you're doing. I just want you to have a play. Now sometimes depending on how you sketch, so if I sketch, let's say, a rectangle and I get back to the start, it's going to automatically end that line segment for me, all right? That's fine. If you want to start another one, just start sketching again. If you are drawing sort of a segment of lines and you want to end that segment, you can either press escape, but pressing escape will end the line tool, all right? Or if you want to keep the line tool going and start a new line, what you can do is double click. That'll end the line segment and then you can start a new line segment. Okay. All right, so let's change tools. So with the mouse gesture again, right click, drag, and drag to the right. And this time you'll get the circle tool. So with the circle tool, you basically click, one click, that starts the center point of the circle. You drag your cursor out, click again, that will drop the outside of the circle. So just add some different circles around. All right, and then that's done. Now, the last gesture option is right click, go down, and that is a rectangle. Pretty self-explanatory. When you do the rectangle, it'll add 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines. Okay. So, cool, pretty straightforward. They're just some of the basics. There's a lot of other sketch tools. Okay, 3-point arcs, polygons, slots, spline tool, ellipse, etc. We'll get to those later. I just want to show the basics now to get an understanding of how some of these things work. Okay, so a couple of things that you might have noticed. First, all these green dots, all right, these little green squares, they're called relations, and they're very important to help us set up our sketches in a way that makes it, again, easy to edit and modify, troubleshoot. So when I'm talking about fully defining a sketch, fully defining it means that all the lines, all the circles, they know where they are supposed to be in that sketch. They know their dimension, they know their radius, okay? And they also may need to know if they're a horizontal line or a vertical line or parallel. To fully define a sketch, you need a combination of relations and dimensions. Okay, we haven't done any dimensions yet, but these are just relations you can see on screen. So some of these relations, some are pretty straightforward, like this one here. Okay, a vertical line. All right, that little marker there means that that line is vertical. So if I click on that line, you can see on the left of the screen, line properties, right? And you can see under existing relations, it says vertical. All right, so a vertical relation is added to this line. What that means is if I click that line and I drag it, that line is always going to stay vertical. All right. Down the bottom here, there's a horizontal one. Same thing, it's always going to stay horizontal. So if I have a line that's just sort of in space with no relations on it, I can click an endpoint of that line and I can move it around to any angle. All right. But if a line like this has a vertical relation on it, I can't change the angle of that line. It's always going to stay vertical. Now, that's only going to stay vertical while it's got that relation. If we've drawn a line like this here, and I actually want to change the angle of it, and don't want it to be vertical, I don't have to delete the line, I just have to delete the relation. So I can just click on that little relation icon and hit delete on the keyboard, and that'll remove it, and then I can change the angle of that line. Right. The same way that you delete relations, you can also add them. So if I've got a line that I want to make a vertical line, I can select it, and then when you select any sort of sketch segment, on the left of the screen you can see properties, and if you go down, there's an option there to add relations. So I can add a vertical relation to that line, okay, and it's going to make it vertical. All right, makes sense so far? All right. So some of these other relations we can see over here. I've got this parallel one. So you can see when I hover over the relation, it makes those lines pink. All right, that's indicating that those two lines are parallel. Over here, this one is a coincident relation. Coincident relation can be a few different things. In this case, it's saying that this line is coincident with that bottom right corner of that rectangle to the left. Okay, but coincident can be a few things. It can be the end point of a line joining to another line, okay, or it could be a line coincident with the center point of a circle. Over here there's some more parallel. Now here's one that's a little bit different. So what we've got here, this one is a midpoint relation. So what that is that these two lines here, which are coincident, the end point, they are coincident with the middle point of this line. What that means is if this line changes in length or position, those other lines are connected to the midpoint, they will always stay at the middle point. So if that line gets bigger or smaller, the middle point is obviously getting bigger or smaller as well. Those other lines are joined to that point. Over here, we have some lines that are on some angles. This is a perpendicular relation, which means that those two lines are a 9-degree angle. Okay. Now, so there's a lot of different relations out there. We haven't touched on them all yet. A couple others we'll look at when we get into the first project parts. But they are very important for setting up our sketches. Now, the other thing I want to talk about in this sketch is just with the use of the origin. Now, when I'm sketching or working on any parts, I typically hide my planes because it can make it difficult to see the origin and see other features. So at the moment, where you can see my 3 planes over here, it's very hard to see that center point. So I'm just going to click on the left, the feature tree on the left on those planes and press hide. So I'm going to hide each of those planes. And what you can see here, this red arrow is the origin. All right. So if we're sketching a part from scratch, we want to make sure we reference the origin. What I have at the moment is a circle with its center point on the origin. What that means is I can drag that circle, make it bigger or smaller, but the center point is actually connected to the origin. So I can't move the center point of the circle. All right, I can only change the size. So when I talk about referencing the origin, in this case, the center point of the circle is referenced on the origin. Another option is to have something like the line here, this horizontal line. I can, if I want to add a relation between 2 points or 2 lines, I hold Control on the keyboard and select the origin, and I can make them coincident. Right? So that now makes this horizontal line always in line with the origin horizontally, okay? Or it's coincident. Okay, that horizontal line is coincident with the origin. Now, last thing I want to touch on in this before I clear it and we start the first part. Can anyone notice in their sketch lines that look a little bit different? Okay, different in thickness. Yep. So that'll happen when you have line segments which create an enclosed space, and then another line segment which it's almost like it shouldn't be there, right? So, you know, if we look at this shape here, I've got a bit of an outline going around this part, and then I've got another line that's in the middle of this section. I've got another thin line here as well. They're not necessarily big issues, but if I'm drawing, let's say I'm going to draw a shape like this that I'm going to turn into 3D, what I don't want to have is another little line like that tagged off the side. All right, that's going to cause issues with my sketch when I'm trying to dimension and extrude and things like that. So as much as we can, we want to have an enclosed sort of space. So if I delete that line, you can see how that one goes back to a normal sort of thickness. And same with those two. Once I delete those, all of a sudden this area is a nice enclosed area again. So the last thing we'll just touch on here for sketching is how to select. So if you just click on any individual line or circle, it'll be selected, it'll highlight as different color. You'll see it in properties on the side. If you just selected one thing, it'll say circle or line. If you want to select multiple things, hold Control, and then just click on the other things, other items, and you'll see them come up as selected entities in the properties on the left of the screen. When they're selected, if you want to remove them, you can hit delete on the keyboard, or you can sometimes move them all as one group. Not always, but sometimes. But there are some different ways to select things if you want to sort of clear them or change them to construction lines, for instance. The best way is using the mouse. So first thing I want to teach you, and this is something that can carry across to different programs, is selection boxes. So if I draw a selection box from the top left to the bottom right, see how it's blue? If I go from bottom right to top left, it's green. All right, now this is just by clicking the left mouse button and dragging. Now what the difference is let's just look at these 3 rectangles here. I'm going to draw that right square, that blue square, over these lines here. So when you go from top left to bottom right, that selection box, it's only going to select the lines that are inside that box. All right, so it's only selected those 3 lines there, 1, 2, 3. So if I wanted to delete them, I could just select it like that. If I draw that same box, but go the opposite direction, bottom right to top left, it selects everything it touches. Okay, so it can make it easy to select either way, all right, depending on what you're trying to do. Typically, you're doing a lot of selections like this because you want to clear things, delete them, but you can make that easy. Another way to select lines, a segment of lines, or a chain, is to right-click on the line and press Select Chain. And if those lines are all sort of joined together in a chain, you can select them all and then delete or move or whatever Okay, so just to show you what it looks like now, I want to accept this sketch. So in the top right corner, hit the accept sketch icon, which is the one that's not the red cross. And then just click off. And what you can see, all your lines should go grey. All right, so that's a sketch that's just sitting there in your viewport. And on the left of your screen, you can see sketch 1. If you start a new sketch by clicking, let's say, the top plane again, new sketch, you're drawing new lines, your new lines will be blue while those other lines are grey, all right, because you're in a new sketch. If you want to go back and edit the lines in the first sketch, you need to select that sketch that says sketch 1, or you need to double click on one of those lines. Okay, and that will get you editing that original sketch again. Okay. All right, so we're going to just delete those, start again, and let's now get into the first project. All right, so the information that we have in this part, I'm just going to zoom in. We have a dimension A to B, 90 millimeters. We have a pretty good sketched out shape. Looks like it's a smooth join around the edges. And then holes, hole A and B and 6 holes at the bottom. All right, so we're going to build, even though when I'm teaching in Solidworks, keep in mind that there's sort of a method to the way that I'm teaching you. As we go through the semester, you'll learn, there's a quicker way to do what we did in week 1 or week 2, which is fine, but I want you to understand the basics. So later on, you'll learn that this part here, okay, we could do that in one sketch and just extrude the whole thing. But for this task, we're going to extrude up, and then we're going to do holes, and we're going to cut down, all right, just to learn how that step works. So, first thing, we're going to start a new sketch. Now, what I didn't mention earlier is that it's important which plane you sketch on. All right, so when you create your parts and we put them into an assembly, they come into the assembly in the same orientation that you've built them in their part file. All right, so we're going to put together a pulley, which will have the pulley wheel in the middle. It will have some side plates up like that, and a form bracket and pivot pin at the top. So we don't want to build the side plate lying down like that, because when we bring it into the assembly, it takes a few extra seconds to get it upright and in the right position. So if we can model it in the right orientation to begin with, it makes it a lot easier. So let's select the right plane to sketch on. So click on the right plane and then click New Sketch, and it should take you to the right plane like this. Now, our very first step is to build in, we're going to build 2 circles. Okay, sketch 2 circles. So we're going to do a large one at the bottom and a smaller one at the top. The large one at the bottom needs to start on the origin. That's going to be our sketch segment that's referencing the origin. So mouse gesture to the right to get the circle tool. Click on the origin, which is that red arrow. Now when you're clicking and dimensioning and sketching, it's really just click, let the mouse go, the mouse button go, drag out, click again, and that creates your circle. All right. And then zoom out a little bit, and then up above that circle, create another one at the top that's a little bit smaller. And now we're going to use some line segments to join up the sides. All right, so change your cursor to the line tool. So right click, drag to the left. If you can't get the hang of mouse gestures, you can always just click the tools at the top in the menu as well. Now, please pay close attention here to what I do. I'm going to do it on the left side, I'm going to do it wrong. On the right side, I'm going to do it correct. Right? So see if you can pick up the difference. So this is wrong. This is correct. Can you guys tell the difference? Can anyone point out to me what they think the difference is?
It's not tangent to the circle on the left, so it actually cuts through the circle.
Yeah, spot on. So down here you can see that, all right? Whereas on this side, so that's the tangent relation icon there. So the difference is, when I started this line segment over here, it started the line segment horizontal to the origin, okay? So it's added a relation, we don't really want that relation in there. Solidworks always tries to help as much as it can, but we don't want that relation. So if you've added that one, select it and delete it. This other relation here, coincident, we do want that, okay? That's the end point of the line coincident with the circle. So that's fine. At the top, we need to do the same thing. So where it's that horizontal relation with the end point of the line horizontal to the center point of the circle, delete that, all right? Now to add a tangent relation, we need to select those two segments. So I can select the circle, hold control, select the line, and then I can press tangent. Okay, and that makes that line tangent to the circle. I want to do the same at the bottom as well, so that on both sides, I've got that line that's tangent.
Yeah, you fall on that. And that one. I'm trying to make it so I have to delete that one.
That one's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, now select the circle. So select the outside.
Yep.
Hold control. Select the line. And then
How do I do that? I have to press
cool. So you're going to want to delete that line there.
So this one also I will delete that.
This is correct. As I said, to start off, you know, we're going pretty slow, and there's a lot of basic stuff to get right, but we'll pick it up as soon as you know, as soon as it sort of suits everyone. Okay. All right. So I'll go through a couple of steps, and then anyone that's still behind, I'll continue to help you out. So this is correct at this stage. So what you should see is your main circle at the bottom has a coincident relation with the center point, and then in each of those sort of four corners, you have a coincident and tangent relation. All right. Now, what we're going to do next is try and get this sketch fully defined. All right. So you'll be able to see what that means for the first time. So at this stage, I can click this circle and I can drag it. All right, move it in and out. And I can click the one at the top and I can drag that to the side, in and out. Okay, or I can click these lines, move them in and out. All right, so everything's really adjustable. But we want to lock this in, okay? We want to give it dimensions and have it fully defined so it's ready to use later on. If we go back to this sketch here, This gives us our only sense of scale for this part, okay, the A to B, which is the 90 millimeter. All right, so I'm going to show you now how to add dimensions. So dimensions, because they're used really commonly as well, that's the last mouse gesture, where you right click and drag up, and that will give you the Smart Dimension tool. All right. While you've got that dimension tool on, you can't sketch anything, okay? You have to click it up here or turn it off, all right? To be able to select things as well, you can't select things when it's on, all right? When the dimension tool's on, all you can do is dimension, that's it. We want a dimension between those two center points, all right? When you've got a circle, all right, two circles, if you want a dimension between them, you can click on the exact center point, or you can just click the outsides of the circles, okay? It'll automatically go to the center point of the circle. So click on the first circle at the bottom, and as you move your cursor out, you'll see it gives you a diameter, okay? We'll use that later, but we want a dimension between the two center points, so click on the second circle as well, and then you should have a dimension like this that comes off to the side. Click again to drop that dimension, and then with your keypad on the keyboard, the number pad, type in 90 and hit enter, okay? And that's going to rescale your entire sketch to that dimension. All right, this is just an important time-saving tool. The very first dimension you put into your very first sketch of your object will scale everything you've just sketched to whatever that dimension is. All right. So if I try and undo that, and I delete that dimension, and then I try and put another one in that says 900, because that's the first one, that's fine. Let me see if I can get the example right. All right, but once I try and go to 90, okay, after deleting that, now that scaling doesn't work. All right. Okay, so that's our first dimension. All right, so we're going to add some other dimensions, all right, to try and get this fully defined. So, what's your name, man?
Brett.
Brett. How big do you think the circle at the bottom should be? Three, 2, 1.
45.
Okay. And the top one, smaller. So let's say, I don't know, 30. Yep, fine. The whole point of this is just to put the dimensions in there. All right, next week we're going to get more information from our client that's going to tell us what these dimensions are, should be. Because the dimensions are in the sketch, we can come back and change them later. All right, and it'll be really quick to do so. All right, what you should notice once you put that 45 in at the bottom, that circle is now a black line. All right, it's gone from blue to black. That black line means it's fully defined, okay? So in the case of that circle, the circle center point is located on the origin, so it can't move, and the circle diameter is set at 45. All right, so that line work can't move anymore. All right. With the rest of our line work, what you find now is if you try dragging it around, the shape won't really change anymore, okay? Just the orientation, you know, you can sort of move it side to side, but other than that, it's pretty much keeping its shape. The last thing we need to do to fully define this sketch is to stop it moving side to side, all right? So when you're adding relations, you don't always have to use a line or a circle to add a relation. In this case, we want this object to stay, straight up. So I'm going to select the center point of that circle at the top, hold Control, and select the origin, and I'm going to say vertical, which means the center point of that circle is going to be vertical above the origin. And once you've added that relation, the entire sketch is now black. It's fully defined. Right? In the bottom right of your screen, okay, across, there's a few little numbers and text there. You'll see it says fully defined. Or if your sketch is still blue, it'll be underdefined. I will show an example soon of what it looks like when it's overdefined, which is sort of one step too far. We'll come back to that. The other thing on the bottom of the screen here while I'm here, MMGS with a little arrow next to it. If you click on that, that's the units of measurement, right? Millimeters, grams, and seconds. When we're working here, this class, all your work should always be MMGS, millimeters, right? If it ever says IPS, it's imperial. Everything you're doing is in inches, and it means all your dimensions and stuff's going to be wrong. All right, you'll have to change everything back. So the default on these computers should be set to this, but for whatever reason it can be changed. Just be aware of that's where it is. Okay, units of measurements there. All right, I'm just going to come around and check, see if everyone's at this stage, and then we'll go on to the next bit. Right, so this is very good. So see how I can move it. This one is not quite right there. And then the last one is add that vertical relation that I just demonstrated. Yeah, that's the overdefined, which I'm going to talk about soon. For this dimension, select it and just press delete. Not that, sorry. Click like there. Delete like that. Yeah. Now, yeah, this is okay. Get rid of that extra line that's in there. So you can't do it with the dimensions we want. Turn it off. And then grab that center point. Hold Control. Now, what's the difference on this dimension here? It's grey. It's not an actual lining dimension. Right? So you delete that. Just make another one. So this grey dimension here is not going in here. Yeah. So one in. Now your lines here as well, we don't have that tangent relation. Right, that's why it doesn't look very smooth. So you can select both of those, but you go to tangent, and now it's a very smooth form. Tangent. So you select the circle, hold Control, select the line. Now the other thing that you need to do is get this directly above here. So we select the origin and that center point, and go vertical. Add a tangent relation there and you're done. Okay. So what's going on here? I'll just grab that for you. So that's coincident. So the end point of the line is on the circle. That's tangent. The line is tangent with the circle. You need to have that one also tangent and that one also coincident. So select the circle, hold Control, select the line, tangent. Circle, end point of the line, coincident. Okay, so do. Very good. That's fine. Yeah.
These have got to meet up with the center, don't they?
No, they don't.
They don't?
No,
So
they don't.
just above.
They should, yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that's all good. So what's going on here is the top. Those ones shouldn't have that horizontal. Alright?
No, like
Instead
I
they
feel
should
like
be
when I go this way, I should be going closer, but I'm going further away.
Are you talking about the zoom with the mouse?
Yeah.
So you can go to the settings and change that, I think.
Feel like it. Yeah. I'm used to it. Yeah.
See that?
Okay. So I reckon I might be used to the other way.
Yeah, so everything's customizable. So if you go Tools, Options, there's System Options and there's Document Properties. Document Properties is always tied to the file that you're working on, right? So you can have different files with different annotation styles or dimension settings, etc. System Options is like the whole software. So under System Options, you have somewhere there'll be settings to do with how you view things, move around and stuff like that. Sorry, here, view, reverse, mouse wheel, zoom direction. Okay, so there's options for everything. All right, so I think everyone's at this stage. Yep. Cool. All right, so this is fully defined, which is great. I'm just going to explain what underdefined and overdefined is. So I've put a new line in this now, and so all of a sudden the sketch is underdefined again. Okay. If I want it to be fully defined, what I have to do is make sure that that line is referenced to the origin. Okay, I give it a dimension there, and I give it a length here. All right, that line is fully defined. Now the whole sketch is fully defined again. Okay. What overdefined is when you've got one segment or line or dimension which is counteracted by another one, or there's two conflicting dimensions or relations. The easiest example I can give to you is, okay, here's a vertical line. If I tell this line to also be horizontal, it can't do it, right? It can only be one or the other. So it's highlighting to me here the issue in red or yellow, right? Red's always the worst, yellow is a bit of a warning. Typically, if you have something that's overdefined and you delete the red or the yellow part, it'll be okay again, right? A similar thing with dimensions. So I've got a dimension here telling that line that it's 60. If I add another dimension on and make this one driven, and sorry, let's try that again. Make it driving. All right, I've got two dimensions trying to tell the line how long it's supposed to be, all right, which doesn't work. Even though they're the same number, it's saying overdefined. All right, so if you ever have the error where all your dimensions all of a sudden go yellow, typically just delete the last one you've done. Try fully defining your sketch in another way. It might be a dimension elsewhere or a relation elsewhere. Just while I'm on that, so this dimension here, the black one, 60, that's a normal sort of dimension. If I add another dimension to that same line, and it gives me this option here, what this means is the line is already defined. Do I want to make the new dimension driven by the existing dimension? All right, so driven would mean that, yes, I can have a dimension there, but it's not going to actually do anything. Another example of that is, let's say, between this line and this line here, which is on an angle, all right, they're already fully defined. Okay, so that angle is not actually going to change anything, but I can leave it driven, which makes it grey, and it means it will tell me what that angle is. All right, so if I change this number here, 120 to 50, see that angle, actually it hasn't changed at all. Okay, it's not going to change by that. What it might change by is this dimension. If I change this to 80, right, now that angle changes. All right, so that's a driven dimension. Driven dimensions, they, apart from telling you what it is, they're never going to affect your design. All right, if you have them in your sketches, really, you can just delete them. You don't need them. Okay, so So I'm going to delete that line, and so we're back at this stage here. So if we accept that sketch, let's get out of it, you'll see in your feature tree, that sketch, there's no little minus symbol next to it. Right? That means it's fully defined, that sketch. Right? That'll make a little bit more sense later on when we have a few more sketches and I can point out the difference between them. So now we're going to do an extrude. Right? So we select that sketch and click on the Features tab and click Extruded Boss Base. Now, the way I'm showing you here is just to explain a little bit about contours. So what we've created with the shape around the outside, with the two circles and then lines on the sides, is a shape with 3 contours. So we have a top section, a middle, and a bottom. Typically, we want to avoid doing this with our sketches and our features because it can lead to errors down the track, right? What we want to try and do is just have one open contour that we use for the extrude. So instead of extruding this way, which you can do if you really wanted to or needed to for a particular reason, if you had a really complex sketch, okay, you just want to pick out a few sections of it. Instead, what we want to do is go back and edit the sketch. All right, so cancel the extrude. So press Escape or press the red cross. Click on the sketch, click Edit Sketch, and on the sketch toolbar, click on the tool that's Trim Entities. Okay, the scissors. So the trim tool, there's 5 different options there. Trim Entities. 5 different options. Power trim is the one you'll use 90% of the time. Right? And the way it works is you click and you can drag your cursor around, and the shape that you create, it will trim any line it crosses over to the nearest points. And if you keep going, you can like remove your whole sketch. Okay? But then you can just go Control Z and undo. So undo and redo work to a certain extent in Solidworks. All I want to do is trim over that little section of circle and that bottom section of circle. All right, so that creates now our outside shape. All right, then I can hit Escape to cancel the trim tool. And then I'll go Features, Extrude. And this time when I do it, because there's only one shape there, I'll automatically get a preview of the extruded shape. Do that again.
Are they trimmed lines?
Sorry? Yeah, that's okay. So press Features, Extrude.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Features, Extrude, top space, top left. Alright, so that's your preview. Okay, so you can adjust the thickness. Okay, put in whatever thickness you think it should be. Have a look at the drawing. It doesn't really matter. Remember, we're going to come back and change it anyway. I'm going to put in 5 and press OK or press Enter again. Okay, and that's created Boss Extrude 1. All right. Pretty easy, straightforward, yeah? All right, so now that we've got one solid body there, we're going to create a new sketch, create all those circles, and then cut the holes. All right. So once you have this is called a solid body. All right, once you have a solid body in your part, you can now select flat faces of the body to sketch on. So a flat face would be this face here on the front, or this face on the side, okay? Because that was a straight line, that is now a flat face because we extruded it straight out. Whereas the arcs around the top and the bottom, they're round. I can't sketch on those directly. So I'm going to select that front face and hit Sketch. And when I do it on a face, it won't automatically make it normal 2, so I need to do that manually. So spacebar, normal 2. All right, now I can draw my holes. So having a look at the drawing, I've got a hole at A and B, and then I've got 6 more around the bottom. So I'll grab the circle tool, the hole at A, or the one down the bottom, just draw that in. That's easy because I can drop that on the origin. All right. Up the top, all right, there's no origin to click on, but if I hover my cursor over the arc around the outside edge, it'll show me the center point. And once that center point is showing, I can click on the center point and drop that next circle. All right, and that's adding a coincident relation between the arc and the center point of your new circle. I also want to do those holes at the bottom. So I'm just going to draw one circle here. Those holes at the bottom are all going to be the same size, and we're going to assume that they're going to be equal spacing. All right. So we're not going to draw 6 holes. We draw 1, and then we're going to pattern them. So I'll show you how to do that. So to do any pattern, you need to have first the sketch segment that you're going to pattern. All right. On our sketch toolbar, under linear sketch pattern, there's a drop down arrow, and there's circular sketch pattern. Select that, and that'll open up this little properties manager on the left. Now, in the box down the bottom where it says entities to pattern, click in that box, and if it's already in there, arc 1 or whatever it is, that's fine. If not, you want to select that circle that you're going to pattern around. Okay. And then you should see a preview already of the pattern of the holes. By default, Solidworks thinks that you might want to pattern around the origin. All right, so that's why that's come up automatically. If we wanted to pattern around a different point, we just click up the top here where it says axis, okay, in this very top box, and you can manually select any sort of point to pattern around. All right, so you can vary that. It doesn't have to be the origin. The next box is down. We've already got equal spacing ticked, I think, by default. Change the number to 6, and you see how the pattern increases. The other thing we want to do, because we're trying to fully define it, let's dimension the radius. So tick that box, and then press OK. All right, and that's created our pattern of 6 circles. All right, so that sketch is pretty good now. We just need to fully define everything. So the tricky one, even though it looks like it's sort of fully defined, well, these lines down the bottom, if I click one of those circles, like the center point of one, and drag it, you can see how it moves to the side. All right, all I have to do is click that construction line, which is at the center, and just drag that back to the origin. Snap it to the origin, and then that line itself I can make vertical. Okay, and that's sort of starting to define that pattern. Now that's all left, I think, is a dimension for these circles. So all these circles need a dimension. All right, so can anyone tell me how big they should be? How big should the holes be?
5 mil.
5 mil, 7 mil? Let's go with 7. 7 sounds good. All right, so I'm just going to make that central one 7. Now, looking at this sketch, they all look pretty much the same size, don't they? Right? It makes no sense to go and dimension them all individually. The pattern one in particular, okay, because they're already made from a pattern, you only need to dimension one of those holes. All right, but this hole at the top, that's going to be the same as this one in the middle, down here. Instead of adding a separate dimension at the top, I can actually select both of those circles, and while I'm at it, I'll select the first circle of the pattern and I'll make them all equal. All right, so they're equal relation. That makes them all equal in diameter. And that means that later on, when our client tells us, no, those holes are actually 11 millimeters, you just change that dimension there, and that will update all of them at once. All right, rather than have to update multiple holes. Okay. The dimension here that was created by the pattern, just make that 15. All right, and then we can see our sketch, and that's ready now. It's fully defined to go to features, and this time we'll go extruded cut. And again, we'll get a preview. This time it's cutting into the material. The default for extruded cut is whatever distance the last extruded boss is. All right, so if my last extrude was 5 millimeters, it's going to put in a default of 5 for the cut. Okay, which is fine. That's fine, isn't it? It's going all the way through. So hit enter, and then we can see our holes cut. If I rotate around, you can see they're going all the way through. That's it. Mouse gesture. Right click. Also, sketch. Yep. Yep, just one. So now under sketch pad, so the arrow. Yep. Circle sketch pad. Okay, go from there. One thing that you did when you did your pattern, you had this hole in the middle as well. So there's 6 copies of that hole on that line. Right? See how it's working on there? So then we just go back to one there. Sweet. Right, now, these ones, because they're a pattern, they're already equal anyway. You just touch one. Now, one thing that's not shown in the screen is the relations. So if there's stuff I do on screen and you miss it, you want me to do it again, yell out, I'll do it again on the spot. All right, no problem. That looks good.
Why can't I dimension my circles?
Okay, you can,
Yeah,
but
it's saying no.
not while you have 3 things selected at once.
Oh,
Okay. So grab your dimension tool,
yeah.
click the circle, and then drop it. There you go.
Did you manage to make them all equal?
Yeah.
So you want to make all of these the same dimension so that they all have a relation that's like equal?
I just did like the one on top.
All right, I'm just going to finish off this part.
But this one
All
is
right, just with a one last thing to show you guys, and then we'll move on to the next one. All right, and if you're still going on this part, that's fine. We've got plenty of time, and I'll come back and help you out.
Yeah.
So I just showed you how that cut works, okay? So we did the extrude 5 millimeters, then we cut 5 millimeters. What happens if the thickness of the extrude changes? So I'm going to click Edit Boss Extrude, and I'm going to change it from 5 to 6. Now my cut doesn't go all the way through anymore. All right. So one of the other things I'll talk about often is design intent. Right, so what SolidWorks is really good at when you set it up in the right way is working with your design intent. So my design intent with that feature for the cut is that it's always going to go all the way through no matter what the thickness. All right? It enables me to do that as long as I put in the right settings. So if I edit the cut extrude and change where it says blind. So blind is just going blind in a direction however far you tell it. I could put in 6 mil here, but again, if that thickness changes, I'm going to have to change this again. But if I change that blind to through all, that means it's always going to go all the way through no matter how thick the part is. All right, so press OK. And now what you can see when I change the thickness, all right, drag it right up, that hole's still going to go all the way through. All right, so that's where your design intent comes. Knowing what you're trying to do with your part, okay, like the end result, help you save time and help you when you need to make changes later on, all right? Okay, so that part is done. So I'm gonna save that. Now, to save you guys time, one of the criteria of the first project for which you can get 20% of 30% of the semester is saving your files correctly and when you submit, having all those files there. Pretty easy, okay? So the tip is that the number here, PO3, that's the file name, and the other bit where it says side plate, that's what goes in the description. So file save. What I suggest, now I don't know how many of you know this, so I'll go over this from scratch as well. When you log in using your S number, all right, you are logging into your own drive as well. So if you look under my computer, you'll see a drive which has your student number on it. And I think it's the H drive usually, okay? That's your own folder system. You can create folders on there, you can store all your work, you can access that from home by going through the My RMIT website. All right, I've got stuff here from like 10 years ago, 2008, even, yeah, 9, 10 years. And it stays there, okay? It'll stay there for a very long time. So you can create your own folder on there. I suggest you do. So create a folder, CAD to CAM, create another folder, project 1, and then save your parts in that folder. So I'm gonna go and do the same thing. Class files. Again, name it yours, whatever you want, but I'm just creating that folder there so that now I can save my part. Project 1, class files, you go PO3, and this box that says description at the bottom, that's where I'm putting in side plate. Save. While we're at it, I'll mention this. Every semester, 1 or 2 students lose all their work because they haven't backed up or saved it properly. Keep that in mind. Think about how you might back up your files, okay, or save regularly. Right. Dropbox is really good. Having a USB that you don't forget to take with you is really good as well. Okay. Okay, so that first one's done. This part, the bush, show that very quickly. It's obviously very, very simple. So it's 13 mil in diameter. So we start a new part first. On the right plane, we're going to draw 2 circles. Dimension the one on the outside. And dimension 1 on the inside. I'm just going to make it 9. Alright, so that's a sketch, fully defined. the gestures will change depending on what you're doing. If you're editing a sketch, there'll be lines and dimensions. If you're in an assembly, there'll be like RMIT or change the view. If you're not editing a sketch, like you're just in a normal part, it'll be like change your view angle. Okay? So they can vary. And like anything, gestures can be customized. All right, you can actually have up to 8 gestures. We've only got 4 by default, but you can change it to 8. So what I've got is 2 circles. One on the outside's 13, the one on the inside is 9. I've guessed 9. And what we're going to do is now extrude this bush. So one of the different ways of extruding, we'll make it 30 mil long, is to actually go mid-plane. We saw this in the video very quickly. Mid-plane lets you make something symmetrical around the plane that you sketched it on. So instead of going out 30 millimeters one direction, if I change that to mid-plane, that's going to go 15 millimeters in both directions. But you don't have to work it out, it'll work it out for you. Right, so change it to mid-plane and change your distance to 30. Now it's this, not the starting point, but it's the direction. So direction 1, mid-plane, 30 millimeters, okay. That's it. Pretty easy part. Again, save that.
What part number is that?
Have a look at the drawing. Don't be lazy. Okay, nice. All right, next one. All right, the washer, PO2. So this is done with a different method. So even though it's basically a couple of circles and a cut down the middle, and we could do it with an extrude and a cut extrude, there's a more efficient way to do it. All right, so you know, one of the other things I'll try and teach you guys is the most efficient way to do things. If you can do something 2 clicks less, all right, 2 steps less, think into the future as you get into more advanced design, more advanced parts, how much time that's going to save you. All right, so save you hours, and time is money, so it's good to save. So what we're going to do here is a revolve. All right, we can tell it's a revolve because it's 360-degree rotation. It's the same shape. Okay, where there's a section sliced through, and that section is this little hatched area we can see. Right, if we sketch that section, we can revolve that whole shape in one hit. So what we're going to do, again, new part, and on the front plane, new sketch. The very first thing we're going to do is a construction line. Now when we're doing a revolve, we normally have a construction line because it helps us have an axis to rotate around. So a construction line is just a normal line, okay, that we draw starting on the origin going up. But then you select the line, and in the properties on the left of the screen, where it says options, tick the box that says for construction, and that turns it into a construction line. Construction lines don't affect your geometry, as in if you're trying to extrude or revolve or do anything like that, they're not going to come up, okay? They're just there as a guide, all right? Now, construction lines can be anything, all right? They can be any sort of shape, all right? Anything can be a construction line just by ticking that box. And you can always uncheck it if you want to use it again for something else. So what we're going to sketch is this shape here with the 45-degree angle. So we've got 2 dimensions, the angle and the 5mm height. So I'll grab the line tool. I'm just going to start clicking up here. Now it's important, if you think about this shape, that where there is the center area, okay, our construction line starting here in the middle, if I start this shape here, also in the middle, when I revolve it, there's not going to be that hole. Does that make sense? You need to leave a gap between where your construction line is and this new segment, so that when you revolve it around, you'll have that hole in the middle. So instead of starting there, I just start out to the side here. And I'm just going to sketch around slowly. So automatically that I've got a horizontal up the top, vertical down the side, horizontal at the bottom, and another vertical to finish off. Now if you do it in this way, a lot of those lines already have the relations added to them that you need. And that line at the bottom, the horizontal one, is coincident with the origin. Okay, so it's already got height in the right place. We now just need to add the other dimensions to it. So the 5 dimension on the side, I'm just going to click this line here, drag out to the side, hit 5. For the angle dimension, 45, to add that kind of dimension, you select either a horizontal or vertical line first, is the easiest way to do angles. So I'll select the one at the bottom. I'll then select the line that's on the angle, and then where you have your cursor, you'll get a different value. So you'll get either an acute, obtuse, or reflex angle. All right. The end result is the same, but if you've got a certain value, we've got the 45, so I may as well go into the acute area here, drop, and put in 45. Okay, and that ends in that angle dimension. So have a go at trying to fully define that shape. All right, and I'll just come around and give you a hand. See this first dimension? What happens? See how it uses the scale portion? So the very first dimension you put in, you always want to try and make sure that it's correct. And it scales everything for us. Now, if that's okay, right, to be there, if you want to remove it so that you can just have the 45.
Well, I'm pretty sure this is huge. Yeah, that's way too big. Yeah.
Try and go fully defined. Everything's black. Alright, so the aim here is to get a fully defined shape, which means all the lines are black. So, I'll have a go. So first up, the outside dimension. Now here's a little bit of a trick I'll show you. This is to do with when you have a construction line, which is going to be the center of something that you might revolve around. Right? So a center point of a hole, for instance. I can dimension from this outside line to the construction line. That will be a radius, okay, because I'm going halfway of the circle. If I move my cursor to the other side of the construction line, I'll get the diameter, right, double. So if I know what the diameter of this part's going to be, I can put that in, even though I don't have another line on the other side. I'm just going to guess again, make it 14. I do the same thing in the middle to work out what the hole is going to be going down the middle. So I might guess again, make that 6. And then lastly, I need a dimension here. Make that 3. All right, and that's how you can fully define the sketch. Okay, have a go. Yep. So at the moment, because you're out of the sketch, you can't edit dimensions.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to do this.
Yeah. So because we've added these dimensions and closed the sketch, even if we change this now, we're going to lose our shape, which is fine. Right? All we have to do is just move things around. So you just click and drag. Right now it's a long way out, but it's okay. As we add dimensions, we can get it in the right position now. So let's say we want to make that 3. Just click, drop. Okay, and it adds the dimension. Alright, so the next one from the outside, the middle, you can add that, and then the very last one.
How am I moving this?
You don't need to move it. When you add the dimension, it'll move it for you.
Oh, okay, so the next dimension,
So let's do the 6.
the 6, so how?
So click on that first line.
This one?
No, the vertical one. Yep. And then click on this line here. Yep. And then move your cursor to this side. Yep. Drop. And make that 6. Alright, and that moves it for you.
Oh, okay.
Alright, now we'll do the same on the outside. So just click that outside line. And just move your cursor just to that side. Yep. And 14. And moves it for you. And it'll fully define. Alright, so there's 2 issues on yours. The first, remember on that first sketch, extrude that little line segment, we've got another one here. Instead, you need that to be lined up. Second, we want this to be horizontal with that point, so it's in line. Second, your dimension is way off. Where it should be 5. I didn't put 5. So that messes up the shape, but all we have to do is just drag. So just drag the code around. Drag that one around. Okay, and then the shape's back. And then you can just add in the other dimensions. Good. Alright, so see this line, get that big line, the origin, insert, divide. Good.
Yeah, you do. You go. Yeah, you speak it. Yeah, I know that. So,
Okay, well, we're going to finish this one off. So all our sketches done. So click on features. Instead of extrude, this time we hit revolve boss. And the preview will get like this. So because there's one construction line in this sketch, Solidworks picks that up automatically as the one to revolve around. Okay, it's revolving 360 degrees, and we can see the shape that matches pretty closely to what we've got here in our drawing. Hit OK, and that one's done. Pretty cool. All right, again, let's save PO2 washer. Nice work. All right, so there's a few other things I'd like to go over. Just very quick things before we get into the last part we'll do today, which will be part 4. So one of the tools that Solidworks has built in is called Instant 3D. So I've just gone back to this part to show you how it works. When I click on this face, okay, I've just selected the face. That face is part of that boss extrude, which you can see highlighted in the feature tree. The dimensions that we have in the sketch of the boss extrude are what's showing here. All right, so the 30, the 45, and the 90. Okay. Having that Instant 3D unchecked, when I click on that, you see how those dimensions don't come up. All right. So the Instant 3D, which by default should be on, typically just leave it on, that lets you very quickly click on your part, your design, and then click on the dimension, and you can type in a new number. So 70, press enter, and it'll update the shape. So you don't need to go and edit the sketch. You can just click on it, put the number in, press enter, it'll update. If you don't have the dimensions in the sketch already, you're not able to do that. All right, so that's one of the reasons we put them all in. Even if we don't know what they are, like going to be in the end, just put them in now and we can change them later on. And to change them only takes a few seconds. The other thing with Instant 3D, see this little blue marker here, this little blue dot on the end of that dimension? I can click that and see this ruler that comes up. I can actually just drag to adjust that size. Now I can just do that sort of freely over here, or if I move my cursor to the ruler, I can drag along certain increments, 50, 60, 70, 80, etc. So you can see how things would change just by sort of dragging and moving. In the video demonstration we showed that they did it with a fillet. A fillet is a rounded edge that takes away a sharp edge, okay? And they just made it bigger and smaller until they found the right size and then picked that one. But you can do the same sort of thing here. One thing to be aware of though, if you go too small, that might affect the overall detail, right? And sometimes you can drag to a point where it can no longer work and it'll cause errors in the sketch and you need to go fix up the errors. So just have to be aware of it. But whatever you do while you're dragging and you finish dragging, if you hit Control Z, it'll just revert back to the original. The same thing can be done with things like the thickness. So you see the thickness here, the 5. Again, I can click and drag to change the thickness. Okay. All right. Okay, so just going to do one more part and then we'll probably finish a little bit early today, just because it's been probably a big one for everyone to take in everything, but you guys have done really well. So the last one we'll do is going to be this part 4. So Echo, how would you have a go at doing this part? What do you think?
Just starting this side.
So which side? Which side would you do? Sorry. So this side here. So you draw this shape. Is that what you're thinking? So would you draw like a rectangle and then cut, or would you just draw that exact shape that you see?
I'll draw the exact shape.
Okay. Echo's pretty smart here. I reckon she's nailed it first go. But okay, that's good, very good. There are multiple ways we could do this part. Could someone else give me an alternative for how we can model this? Mirroring, yeah, so sort of model half, so we could do this half side here and then mirror it to the other side, yep. Anyone else? Different direction we could start from? No, yes, no one wants to offer anything? It's all right. I'll get you to open up eventually. We could also, instead of from the right side, we could start from the left side. So this shape that we see here, which is, you know, like a semicircle on the bottom and some straight lines across the top. We could take that, we could extrude across all the way, and then we could cut through the middle. All right, that's another option. And then another option again, start on the top, draw that square, extrude straight down. We could cut off then a bit off across the bottom, cut that hole, again, cut this middle side out. There's probably another 5 or 6 different ways that you could model the same part. The point I'm trying to get across is that there's always going to be a large number of ways of doing things, okay? Throughout this project, I'm showing you one very specific way of doing it, which is typically the most efficient way, apart from the very first one we did where we did the extrude up then the holes. But there's always going to be a more efficient way of doing things, okay, until you get to a point where, yep, that's perfect, okay, it's really clean, it's got all the adjustability in it you need, okay, it's fully defined. What we're going to do with this part is, like Echo said, we're going to do the right side here. Instead of doing like a big square and then cutting and then doing the fillets, we're actually going to do the outside edge and then offset it. So this part, the form bracket, in project 2, we're actually going to convert it to a sheet metal part. So a sheet metal part will enable us to flatten it out. All right, so even though it's bent here with the top and 2 sides, we'll be able to flatten it and then laser cut it. And in Solidworks, you're able to do that, but one of the keys to flatten it out is that it's consistent wall thickness. All right, so you can't have 3 mil thick on the top and 2 mil on the sides. It needs to be 1 thickness. So when we're doing 1 thickness, it makes sense to offset, because offset will keep the same profile, the same shape, and move it all in 2 or 3 millimeters. Okay, so this will be the last one we'll have a go at today. If you don't get through it all, that's fine. We'll touch on it again next week, and I'll give you a little bit of homework to do, probably that part 5 there as well. But yeah, let's give this one a go. So let's start this on the front plane. So new sketch, front plane. And this is a new trick, this little one here. I'm going to start a rectangle. I'm not starting the corner of the rectangle on the origin. Okay, very important. Start the corner to the side of the origin and then drag up and over. Make it deliberately bigger on one side and then drop. On that line at the bottom, right click on the line and select the option that's select midpoint. Now that's picked up an imaginary point that's at the middle of the line for us. We can then hold Control on the keyboard, select the origin, which is the red arrow, and make it coincident. All right, what that does is puts the middle point of the line on the origin, which means that this part is now going to be symmetrical around the origin. Okay. So the dimensions we've got 25 width. We don't have a height, but we can guess it's bigger than 25. So put those 2 dimensions in. The height, let's make it 45. All right, so that's pretty straightforward there. Before we do the offset, I'm just going to explain to you how it works. Okay, so the offset tool is on our sketch tools. See it up here, offset entities. Now by default, it'll be 10 millimeters with add dimensions and select chain turn on. I'm just going to turn them off. So how offset works is you put a dimension in, let's say 5, you select a line, and the preview will show that line offset 5 millimeters. Now you can select multiple lines, and if those lines are like at a corner, they will trim those lines to match the same original shape. Typically you want to keep add dimensions on, because that will enable you to change the dimension later on. The reverse, that will flick the direction. Okay, now there's a little yellow arrow there. If I just click on this side, it'll do the offset on this side. All right, but if you hit reverse, that will flip the preview for you. Select chain will enable you to select the whole chain of the sketch without having to click on each one individually. All right, so I normally have that selected, and then you can see the preview go all the way around. Bidirectional will mean the offset will go both ways. Cap ends, that will add either an arc or a line to close off the end. So if you have a specific profile that you were trying to cut into something, you could just draw a line and then do a bidirectional offset and arcs at the ends and just cut that shape very quickly. The last bit's there, construction geometry, base geometry or offset. That enables you to turn your original sketch into construction lines. And this way you can make that cut very easy. So you can go base geometry, okay. You can see how the original line is now construction, and the offset bit and the lines on the outside are normal lines that I can then use to cut or extrude. All right, so that's how the offset tool works. So when we're doing our offset shape here, we're doing this shape from the side. It makes a lot more sense to do these curves now before the offset, because that way the offset will include them for us. We don't need to work it out separately. So what those are called there are fillets, all right? So a curve around the edge. So on my sketch toolbar, you see there's this sketch fillet option. You can select that and change the dimension to 5. And how these sketch fillets work, there's numerous ways. First way is you can select 2 lines and you can see the yellow preview between those 2 lines. Okay. Second, you can select a corner point and you can see the preview between on that point. Or third, you can draw a box, and anything in that box it'll include. Okay, so it shows you a preview here. Now we don't want to fillet those bottom 2 corners, so just go back into the entities to fillet box here and just delete those bottom 2. All right, so we just want the top 2 to be filleted. Press OK, and press OK again to close the sketch fillet tool. If you have a look up the top here, what you can see it's done, it's added an arc between those lines. It's made those arcs equal radius, it's added a dimension, and it's made them tangent to those straight lines as well. So it's done all that work for us. All right, all those relations there. If you wanted those radiuses to be different sizes, you'd have to delete that equal relation, and then you could change the dimension to have one larger than the other. Right, but typically you would want all of the radiuses to be the same in that case, so you do them all in one hit. With this offset entities, if I'm just going to uncheck some of those settings there. Let's change that thickness to 3. Let's select that line at the top and select reverse. See how it's offsetting as well that bottom line, okay, in the preview, but in this shape it goes straight down to the bottom. So we don't want to include that bottom edge. So I'm going to just press escape to cancel that offset. I'm going to select that bottom line and make it for construction. Now when I try the offset again, This time, those yellow lines go all the way to the bottom. Got to make sure I turn off change construction geometry to base. So I turn that off. I don't want to change anything to construction in this one. Now, I did also accidentally have cap ends ticked, which works because what that's going to do is add a little line segment to this bottom edge. Yeah, go. There'll be another one. It's all right. I'll just put the most important stuff in the last 5 minutes. Yeah, so that caps that bottom edge. All right, so that creates the entire shape for me. All right, so now that's ready to extrude. So I go features extrude, 25 millimeters. Like the bush though, we want to go symmetrical. So I change where it says blind to mid plane. Press OK. And yeah, that's it.
What have you
Okay, so it's because the radius is 5, but your offset is also 5. If you change that offset to 3, that will change those. The other thing is that bottom line should be for construction.
Did you put a medium?
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay.
But doing multi-directional.
These are 2 separate lines.
Direction.
Yeah. Yeah, you skip the offset part. So you go sketch, offset.
The sketch looks alright.
Select one of these lines, and now press OK. Oh, press cap ends. Change that to lines. Press OK. Yeah, because you didn't set cap it, so you can just draw a little line segment between them. Maybe I should have left this one for next week. I'm pretty tired too.
Oh, I didn't cap the ends. I thought I selected that anyway. How do I?
That's it. Yeah. Alright, what I'm going to do, I'm going to save that part, but I'm going to leave it there for today. Alright, done a great job, guys.